What's going on, guys? Tomcat here, and today I am proud to bring you guys another Supercar Showdown. Now, it has been a long time since I've done one of these, and people have been asking me to bring it back and asking me to bring it back, and you know what? I missed it, and I really wanted to bring it back, so here it is, guys. I'm getting back into Supercar Showdowns on Forza Horizon. Now, I'm still trying to get myself unbanned because of that, because of getting sent modded cars, but hopefully I'll be able to get myself unbanned, but in the meantime, I can still do videos from the single-player game. So, on to the actual comparison. Now, in this episode, we are comparing the Ferrari F12 Berlinetta and the SRT Viper, as you saw in the beginning. Now, these are two very, very different cars. Well, they're not actually... You come to think of it, they're not actually that different, are they? They're both front-engine rear drive. But that's about... Then, when I think about it again, that's where the similarities sort of stop. They're front-engine rear drive, but that's where the similarities stop. The Ferrari has a V12. The Viper has a V10. The Ferrari has a paddle-shifted double-clutch gearbox. The Viper has a manual. So, they're both very different cars. The Ferrari is very computerized. The Viper is more a car that you wrestle with and sort of muscle it around, whereas the Ferrari is like a finely tuned instrument that glides down the road. And some people prefer the way the Ferrari drives, and some people prefer the way the Viper drives, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. The first test that I always run with these cars, or whichever cars I'm comparing, is a speed test. Now, the first car, obviously, is the Ferrari F12 Berlinetta. Now, the Ferrari F12 Berlinetta, I was able to get, on my second run, I was able to get it to reach 200 miles per hour after rewinding, after smashing straight into that Prius, but I mean, that Prius deserves to get smashed. It's a Prius. But anyway, the Ferrari F12 managed 200 miles per hour, which I was expecting a little bit more out of it. I mean, it does have a 730 horsepower V12, but then again, it weighs over 3,500 pounds. So I was expecting a little more, but it definitely didn't disappoint. It was quite a fast car. And now onto the Viper. Now, launching the Viper actually is not that difficult because it has giant rear tires. Giant rear tires. They might as well be drag tires because they are some of the largest street legal rear tires you can buy. I don't even know if there is a larger rear tire that you can have legally on the street than the one that comes on the Viper. It is just absolutely huge and really, really helps with that off-the-line traction. Now, the Viper is lighter than the F12, however, it doesn't have as much horsepower. In fact, it's down quite a bit on horsepower because whereas the F12 has 730 horsepower, the Viper has only 640 horsepower. And I hate to use the word only in relation to 640 horsepower because 640 horsepower is a huge amount of horsepower, but in this test, it still means the Viper is slightly down on power. Now, even though the Ferrari is more technologically advanced than the Viper still has a couple of interesting gadgets to it. Like, for example, it's got that really cool shift light where the tack will turn red, and then obviously the Viper logo will form inside the tack. I'm not sure if I like that or the F1 style shift LEDs in the Ferrari. I think I prefer the LEDs in the Ferrari because they show a buildup of revs, and you can see them right on the top of the steering wheel, which makes them a little bit easier to focus on because you don't have to look down all the time. But then again, the Viper really adds a cool little bit of drama with that snake head that pops up right in the middle of the tack. So it all depends on your personal preferences and what you like, but when it comes to interior style and interior design, I prefer the Ferrari, and only by a little bit, but I prefer the Ferrari because it seems to be laid out in a little bit more of a streamlined race style fashion. So the Ferrari was the winner of the speed test, and now on to the handling slash drifting test. Now, I was expecting the Ferrari to absolutely monster this challenge. However, I was actually a little bit surprised because the Ferrari didn't have it. It had a lot of horsepower, which gave it a boost in a straight line. However, whereas the Viper was a little down on power compared to the Ferrari was way down on torque compared to the Viper. Now, that combined with the Ferrari's 7-speed gearbox with shorter gear ratios made it a little bit harder to keep in a slide. And that was right there, that was error. That was my personal error. That was not the car. But back to the actual handling and drifting aspects, the fact that the gear ratios in the Ferrari are so short makes the Ferrari really good for acceleration. It makes it great for grip driving because you have a lot of different gear ratios that you can control very quickly with the quick shifting double clutch transmission. However, the thing about it is, when you're drifting and you want to sort of hold it in the power band on a certain gear, it's not actually that good for it because the transmission is always wanting to keep the revs, well, transmission and engine is always wanting to keep the revs high. It's a very high revving engine, which means it kind of goes in and out of the torque zone very, very quickly. It goes in and out of peak torque very, very quickly, which makes it sort of difficult to keep in a slide. I mean, you can work the e-brake if you want to, and that's what I had to do a lot of, but if you shift up too many times trying to find torque, you'll bog the car down because the torque point is small, and it's around 6,000 RPM. It's a little, I think it's either a little bit above or a little bit below 6,000 RPMs. Don't quote me on that though, because I didn't really check. I didn't really like officially check that, but I know what I felt when I was driving it, and it felt like it was somewhere between, I want to say, 5,000 and 6,000 RPM, maybe a little bit over 6,000. So depending on how you like to drive, the Ferrari may or may not be the better car for you. Now, when I got into the Viper, I was really expecting some sideways action because of the amount of torque it has. I mean, and straight away going into the first corner, it felt a lot smoother than the Ferrari did sideways, and it felt a lot more, I don't want to say controllable sideways because the Ferrari is extremely controllable, but the gearbox since the gear ratios were longer and the torque band was larger, it's much easier to hold the Viper in a slide. As you can see, I'm having to work a lot less to hold a slide in the Viper than I was in the Ferrari, and I made a mistake back at that same corner. I can't believe I did that twice. But the thing about the Viper is that it's got all that power, and it can be a very smooth car, but the second you kind of take your focus away from it, it'll spin. It's the kind of car that is perfectly smooth if you're good and focused, but if you take your focus away from it, you'll wind up in one of those canyon walls that you see on the sides, or a guardrail, or you'll spin around. It's not very forgiving to people that aren't really paying attention. You can kind of take your eyes, not your eyes, but you can kind of take your focus away a little bit more in the Ferrari because of the way it's set up. But then again, if you want the Ferrari to slide, you have to really push it. And you don't have to push the Viper as much to get it to slide. I feel like when I'm trying to slide the Ferrari, I'm always, you know, pushing it to the max, pushing it to the max, pushing it to the max. And with the Viper, it sort of slides instinctively, which is definitely the difference between these two cars. So if you guys enjoyed this comparison, don't forget to like the video. Tell me in the comments below what you thought of it. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe for more car comparisons, and I will see you guys later. I'm going to shut up and let you guys enjoy the sound comparison.